Talking shortstops on the Just Baseball show today. The top 10 shortstops in Major League Baseball for the 2025 season. We also got a report about Alex Bregman, and Steve Cohen said some things about Pete Alonso we can talk about if you want. Jack Aram, Just Baseball show for Monday, January 27th. Hope you enjoyed your Sunday afternoon and evening of football. We're recording right before the football. As always, we're presented by BetMGM. I was going to say, this is the first episode in like a month where we haven't had any tangible news off the top, so we could just get into it. But we did get those reports over the weekend about Bregman's preference, what the Red Sox want to do with Bregman, length of deal, what that could mean if he goes back to Houston. And then we also had is it called a Mason Fest or something? The Mets Fest.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what they're calling it, but it looked like they put on a pretty good show there.
Great show.
I know Jolly Olive was like hosting a panel, from John Boy, but, he's really established himself as a guy in the Mets, world well before that. So I imagine it's got to be pretty surreal for him. I've never met him in person, but nothing but great interactions on social media. But also just cool to see a Major League Baseball team, leaning into the younger content creation side of things and tapping into that front. So it looked like an awesome time. I don't know if any Mets fans that listen or on YouTube were there, but I hope more teams kind of follow suit. That's what happens when you have an owner who's actually a fan of the team, though. Seems like they're a little bit more open to those kinds of ideas.
Well, and he gave us something raw and honest about the Alonso negotiations.
Which was it was refreshing, very refreshing. And it wasn't like he shared numbers or details or anything in terms of like bad faith in negotiations, right? At the end of the day, what he did wasn't any different than what Scott Boras does when he texts all of the other people in the media giving them scoops that essentially helps further his side of the conversation as well. This was Steve Cohen kind of matching that, but also being very honest. I don't think Steve Cohen went in there with a script ready to say that. Mets fans started chanting, "We want Pete," when they had that panel going on. And that's where he's like, okay, you know what? Let me explain to you what's going on here. Yeah. And I believe every word he said about, his perspective on it. And of course, two sides to negotiations. Maybe what Pete's asking for is more fair than Steve Cohen thinks, and who knows, but I'd also say that he'd probably be signed by now if that was the case. So it was very refreshing to see an owner be that transparent and not just speak in owner's speak.
And using words like frustrating and discouraging. I think he used the word discouraging as well when he talked about the process of courting Pete and maybe letting him walk and yada, yada, yada. But that just felt like, unfortunately, a breath of fresh air. Yeah. And for Mets fans are saying, "Oh, our guy Pete may not be coming back." Well, it is kind of nice to have that transparent ownership that is willing to open up to the fan base, because you mentioned at heart he is a fan. So that looked like a great event as well. I do want to get into that report real quick about Bregman, because there have been like several that all kind of dovetailed off of each other here. And I think it started with the Red Sox wanting to go shorter term, and then a standing offer from Houston still on the table for Bregman if he wants, and then the defensive ripple effect that would cause if he did return to Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Chicago also, shocker, Chicago and Boston want to go shorter term. Talk about ownership groups there that you're not taking anything they say at these events at face value. Right. And you're just kind of saying, it's all prepared statements, things like that. But the reason why I wanted to talk about Bregman was the wrinkles in it. And like, my prediction before the offseason really got going was that the Astros need Bregman too much and Bregman needs the Astros too much, and they find a way to make it work. But then it started to become a little bit less likely. And especially when the numbers started to get thrown out, and 200 was a number that was flooded. That's obviously not going to happen. And I think as the markets kind of started to make itself evident, right, where a lot of these teams that are very interested in him just aren't willing to go with as much length. Yeah. That maybe AAV wise, it may not be as high as some of the other shorter term deals, but that offer that reportedly is on the table, from Houston, it may not be far off from the best offer. And if you're looking for the best situation, we talk about how Bregman wears out the Crawford boxes. You have, future Hall of Famer in Jose Altuve willing to move to left field. And all of a sudden you look at that Astros team with Bregman back, they're a top 5, maybe even more than that, World Series contender.
Absolutely.
And you feel really good about where they would be at that point. So I think it all could be this massive process that ends up leading you right back to, where he should have always been, which is Houston. Houston made some moves just in case he may leave, but I don't think it would be too much of an issue to throw Altuve into left field if you really had to. With his speed and the Crawford boxes at home, it's pretty easy to play out there. I don't think it would be much of an issue.
Okay, so, and this is too easy of a joke to make, but that was the one report that really came out of left field for me, was that Altuve was willing to move to left because that guy is the second baseman for the Houston Astros. That's how we've always seen Jose Altuve. And I'll be honest, man, I didn't think that quote unquote standing offer for Bregman would still be standing after the Kyle Tucker trade.
Neither did I.
The pursuit of Arenado at the beginning of the offseason, I thought was the writing on the wall for Bregman's tenure in Houston. And that was, okay, we're going to look elsewhere. And when Isaac Paredes and Cam Smith are part of the package for Kyle Tucker, I'm thinking, okay, there's no chance in hell that Bregman is going back to Houston. It doesn't make any sense anymore. And then I saw the report that Bregman was entertaining the idea of playing second base for another team if they were ready to meet the price tag. And now we're talking about Paredes moving to second and then Altuve moving to left. And what happens with Cam Smith when he's ready by the end of the year? It's just it's a bizarre puzzle that I thought was close to being solved 2 weeks ago. And now my brain's all jumbled again on Houston's side.
On the Cam Smith side, I think, that's you'll happily cross that bridge when you get there. And he's now your top prospect very comfortably. But, the interesting thing with Altuve is you could DRS by year here. I mean, he is really slowed down defensively.
For sure.
Negative 15 DRS in 2022, negative 13 in 2023, and negative 13 last season as well. And it was his worst range season as well in terms of outs above average and just overall fielding run value, -8 in the outs above average. So that might just be a better and more natural move for him anyways at this point, where his arm's not great, but again, doesn't really matter when you're dealing with the Crawford boxes and left. And then on the road, there's worse corner outfielders out there, I promise you. And when you're getting the offensive value that you get from a Jose Altuve, it's totally fine. And again, is it going to be much worse than negative 13 defensive run save? Probably not. Or -8 outs above average? Probably not. And I'll bet on a guy like Jose Altuve figuring it out to the degree where he's able to, be a passable or close to it defender out there. I think when you have a teammate, potentially former teammate, that's that willing to do something like that, it's got to make you a little, and I know you're making the best decision for you, but it's got to make you a little bit more willing to go back there. And, if it's 10, 15 million to go to this totally different situation, you talk about Detroit, Bregman's a smart guy. I think he knows how his offensive numbers would be impacted there. But if you're getting the contract offer that you wanted with the years that you want, okay, who cares if I'm not squeezing out every drop because I got my generational deal that's going to pretty much put me through to retirement. But if the numbers are pretty close, I'd probably like to just stay with what I know and where I know I'm always going to perform.
I'd assume he's a homeowner. He doesn't need to sell his house. He doesn't need to move. He doesn't need to go through that whole process in a new place. And who knows, it might be over after 5 years. This can be his forever place. And it bolsters his legacy, I think, if he goes back to Houston, because this is a guy that wasn't a pariah in baseball to the extent that some of the other Astros were from that 2017 team, but he was one of the faces of that. And the fact that
his apology, I think about him reading the apology so much from it was like when I had like a report that I had to do like in school. Like,
are you watching Severance?
Yeah.
It's the break room. I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's like the break rooms. I am sorry for what I did. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I feel like coming out the other side, and I don't like bringing up 2017 with Houston because that's so long ago, but coming out the other side and signing another deal on top of that, we're to the point with Altuve where he's undisputed first ballot Hall of Famer now because he has signed another deal and another deal after 17, and he has not entirely absolved from all of that, but he's built his reputation far beyond what happened in 2017, and I think
Yeah.
Bregman is tracking like that as well.
And both guys are like, you can't deny what they've done on the field. They've comported themselves otherwise. You can't find much of another issue with either of those guys in terms of how they carry themselves off the field. It's usually nothing but great things
Right.
from both. So it would be cool to just see. I know a lot of people have the disdain for Houston still and the bad taste in their mouth. I get it, but for me, just from a baseball enjoyer, I'd like to see those two guys play their entire careers in Houston,
Sure.
and you know Altuve is, but try to make another run at it together. And I think Houston has already kind of addressed some of the things, like in terms of setting themselves up for life without them. With the Cam Smith acquisition, with the ability to go get a Paredes with control, and they've got even Walker for a few more years, so that also helps them in the short term as well.
Yeah.
I would love to see it, but the other thing is, from a financial perspective, they need Ryan Presley to okay the trade, because he has a no trade clause. I think the Astros never want to go over the luxury tax threshold essentially, and you probably have to move a Ryan Presley to make that work. Seems like there's been pretty strong conversations with him going to the Cubs, and I think they're kind of waiting on that side of things too.
Is he a Cub by the time the Wednesday Just Baseball show comes out? Yes or no?
Oh, by the time the Wednesday Just Baseball show comes out, I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to say yeah.
Yes.
I think the Cubs need high leverage help that badly, and I forget whose report it was, but if it is true that, Presley wants, kind of a handshake agreement that he's going to have that closer role.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the Cubs just give that to him to start the year? If he sucks in April and May, you relegate him from the closer role. It's not that big of a deal. He can't unwaive the no trade clause at that point and send himself back to Houston. And at that point, it's his fault. If he performs, he performs. If not, it's fine. And you put him in the seventh inning and you hope he can do things there. But I think you should have no problem, given the state of that bullpen, promising Ryan Presley in his career. I understand that he did not have the best stuff, and the tick down velocity wise was not what you want to see. Promise the proven vet the closer role. And if he loses it in May, he loses it in May.
And my thought on the Cubs is I understand Porter Hodge has been really good in their bullpen, but if Ryan Presley wants the closer role on opening day, you give Ryan Presley the closer role over Porter Hodge on opening day. It's not like you have this other guy that has a 30 save season under his belt that feels like he deserves it at this point. And I think Porter Hodge is really good,
and he'll still get the ninth. They'll get it sometimes. It's not like Presley's going to be making 80 appearances and closing every single game out.
No,
and it'll be Hodge's gig next year in 26.
It's also just an insanely volatile position. So who's to say that we're sitting here on April 25th and Porter Hodge is looking like, a legit closing option? He might just not be great out of the gates, and then there that goes. And if Presley is underwhelming, where do you turn? It could be Hodge, could be Luke Little, could be some other guys, man. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer for me if I'm Presley to say yes to this trade, because that is a big market. The friendly confines is your home ballpark, and you get the ninth.
And there's not a lot of bullpens out there that you can justify guaranteeing Presley the ninth, given where his stuff is at in his career.
No.
But the Cubs are one of them. For a contending-ish team, they're probably one of the worst bullpens in terms of proven talent. So it's a perfect landing spot for Presley.
Other names in that bullpen fold: Hodge, Tyson Miller, Nate Pearson, Keegan Thompson, Eli Morgan, Caleb Thielbar, Julian Merriweather.
Yeah.
No, it's Presley's bullpen if he's there.
And they signed Trevor Richards to a minor league deal, according to Just Baseball.
Trevor Richards, I think, as aggressive a gray hair as we have in Major League Baseball.
Oh, yeah. He's had that since his early Marlins days.
He's a silver fox, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I didn't appreciate the silver fox until this past year. And I was like, wow, you're really gray, huh?
Yeah.
I'm tracking your way. So, you want to get into shortstops?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've got the top 10 shortstops in Major League Baseball for 2025. But before that, 3 honorable mentions. And I personally love this trio of honorable mentions because they're all young guys that we expect to take a big step up in 25. And it's Mason Wynn of the St. Louis Cardinals, Ezekiel Tovar of the Colorado Rockies, and Zach Neto of the Angels. You've been singing the Neto praises for quite a while now, and I really bought in after the All-Star break. I will say when the Angels fell out of, I would say the spotlight, but it's not like they were really ever in the spotlight in 24. When they fell out of all hope entirely after the All-Star break in 24, it felt like Neto shored himself up as their shortstop moving forward.
Yeah, and defensively too, right? Like we saw him make some progress there, and maybe that was a little bit of the Ron Washington influence there.
Yeah.
But and at risk of rehashing a lot of the same points, a big reason why I just like to sing the praises of Neto is you look at a lot of his peers from that draft class and the runway that they've had, to mature and develop, and then what Neto has had to do at the big league level, where it's adapt as a hitter, adjust the leg kick, get up to the big leagues after 50 games in the minor leagues, and then also develop defensively. Like that was a lot for him to take on, and he developed defensively, he developed offensively, he tapped into more power. This guy had 23 home runs and stole 30 bags. I think going into 2025, he's absolutely a candidate to take another step forward, and he already had a great year.
Yeah. Same deal with Tovar, man. And obviously this is a guy that is not going to walk at all. 157 games, 655 ABs. He walked 23 times. He hit 270, but he had a 295 on base. I'm not asking him to walk a ton. I'm just saying, like, 26 homers. You swipe a couple more bags than 6. He is so good defensively. He's one of my favorite watches to play shortstop in Major League Baseball. Like, if you can just find a way to get on base a little bit more, I'm all the way in on the Tovar experience.
Another guy that flew through the minor leagues. I mean, obviously not to the Angels' first-round pick degree of how guys go, but we talked about Tovar a lot on the call-up as just one of our favorite prospects for a while because it just felt like such a high probability big leaguer. When you look at the defensive ability, the fact that he's going to run into enough power because he elevates so consistently, and the field of hits solid. The thing is that plate discipline, and that's one of the more difficult things to project, right? Oh, is he going to swing less or not? Because there's so much that goes into swing decisions and high chase rates and things like that.
Yeah.
But if he's able to cut that down, right? If he's able to cut down on a 62% swing rate, I think the big league average is like 45, 46.
For reference, do you have his minor league numbers in front of you when it comes to swing rate and chase rate and all that?
I can in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was about 35% chase rate in the minor leagues, but 54% swing rate. My only concern is, as pitchers continue to adjust, do they continue to just get him to get himself out, or would that have happened by now already? And is he just a guy that's going to get away with some of the higher chase rates in the game? It's going to hold him back from reaching his ceiling, but he's already still such a good player because he's going to hit 20 plus home runs. He's going to play great defense and all that good stuff. Because he has always hovered around 35 to 40% chase rates throughout the minor leagues as well, which just makes me think he's a swing mode guy. That's just, I don't think ever going to be able to fully shake the swing mode. So it's just going to be a matter of, how good is the bat to ball going to get and how consistently are you going to get into your pop?
Yeah, we were just having this conversation with our video king, Ben Bellotti, about Ceddanne Rafaela, right? It's like, how do you change this? If you could only do this, okay, but how? And I wonder the same thing that you do. Has the book been published on Tovar yet? And are guys executing? And is he just a guy that hit 26 homers because people made enough mistakes against him and he punished it? I'm sure that it's a combination of both of those things where, yeah, he punished mistakes, but also the book might not be entirely out on him yet. It will at some point turn into the Javi Baez conversation, where it's how stubborn are you actually going to be? And I hope for his sake, his answer is not that stubborn.
Yeah. Well, and with Baez, I felt like it was to a degree an unfixable. I mean, there's a level of just focus at this point when you watch where it's like he's not even trying, but where Baez had such a loud barrel tip that you have to commit to swing earlier because the bat has to travel so far. So if you have to commit to swing earlier, you're more likely to swing and chase because your decisions are made earlier. The earlier you make your decisions, the less likely it is to be the right decision. Tovar doesn't have some crazy loud operation in the box, or like a lot of the guys that have like longer swings, they'll end up chasing more because they have to start that swing earlier. Tovar is very simple in the box. So that's the other part that's kind of surprising to me. So it does at least lend some hope that he can trim it down. But to your point, like when you're striking out 200 times and walking 23 times, your margin for error becomes so thin on when you're making contact. But the good news is he puts the ball on the ground only at a 35% clip. His average launch angle on batted balls, 95 fletchers. It's one of my favorite things to look at, right?
Yeah.
What angle are you hitting the ball at when you're hitting it hard?
Right.
19 degrees. So every time he's hitting the ball hard, it's in the air with it and it's going. And you do that in Colorado, he's going to get his. So if he's a mistake hitter who plays great defense at shortstop, he's still going to have a really nice career. But at 23 years old, you're hoping that the other things will start to polish themselves off.
I'm optimistic about Tovar. I'm optimistic about Neto. I am extremely optimistic about Mason Wynn's 2025. This is a guy that I feel like is primed to explode. And there were some aspects of his 24 that I thought were underwhelming based on what he had shown in the minor leagues, particularly in the upper minors in 23. I was sitting here expecting Wynn to be an all-star caliber shortstop. I will say he graded out a bit better defensively than I was expecting him to at shortstop, but I think there are some pieces of the all-around offensive game that are going to shore up, and you are going to see as well-rounded a talent as we have at the shortstop position.
Well, you saw him in AAA where, I mean, there was probably a couple of swings he took in series where he was playing in Indy, right? Where you're like, he's got more power than maybe people give him credit for, right?
He was the best player in the International League in 2023.
Yeah. He can hit the ball hard. And another reminder, this is a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
He's going to be 23 right at the start of the season. But this is in the Tovar conversation about hitting the ball at optimal angles. Wynn makes a lot of contact and produces pretty much, I think, it's the same 90th percentile exit velocity as Ezekiel Tovar. But his average launch angle on batted balls 95 plus is 6 degrees. That's a third of what Tovar's is, right? So a lot right now where Mason Wynn's at in his development, a lot of his hardest hit balls, unfortunately, are on the ground or low line drives.
Yeah.
He's fast and he has a good feel for the barrel. So it's resulting in a lot of singles, sometimes doubles in the gap. But I do think that there's 20 plus home run potential here as well as he just learns to continue to drive balls at optimal angles. But to develop as a defender, to only strike out 17% of the time, he cut his chase rate as the year progressed. Yeah, this is a high probability, solid shortstop for a long time. We'll find out if, the tools translate into, an perennial, all-star caliber player, which he could be.
Yeah.
But I feel very confident that he will be a top 15 shortstop, borderline top 10 for a very long time, even if things, quote unquote, stall out for him.
Back to your first point about the sneaky juice that I think everybody got a glimpse of in the minor leagues or the upper minors. I think everybody understood what the floor of Mason Wynn could be because he had a rocket for an arm. He could really move, and he wasn't striking out all the freaking time. But I feel like in his first full big league season in 24 and his upper minor season in 23, people have slowly but surely been keyed into what the ceiling of Mason Wynn could look like with that power projection. And I think that's the important thing with Wynn. Because you mentioned his age, dude. Like, don't forget Jordan Walker's only 22, 23 years old as well. These guys, they could become offensive monsters very, very soon. And Walker has a longer way to go because his swing got a little out of whack in 20.
And there's more pressure on him to rake, right? Like if he puts up a 730 OPS next year, that doesn't look the same as a Mason Wynn 730 OPS, right? So that's the other thing. But I am so excited for these. I hate that. It's annoying that the Cardinals are in a position where they feel like they need to trim payroll, and I think it's silly. But the silver lining in the situation for me is I think the Cardinals have ragdolled a lot of their prospects through the years in the name of trying to win now, which I get is a necessary evil, but there's I think ways that you can balance it a little bit better. They obviously haven't. And now you're going to have this team where I think these younger guys can play a little bit more free. I think Jordan Walker is finally going to play free. Ivan Herrera, who was already playing well when he got reps, is going to play free. Wynn already is established now, but I think even him will play a little bit more free. I'm looking at Sajazi, Victor Scott. I'm looking forward to that side of things as a silver lining. I know fans aren't because it's you're looking at teams that should have made runs in the playoffs a couple years ago. Yeah. But just from the rooting for individuals, baseball enjoyer in me, I'm glad that these young players are not going to be in a spot where it's like perform within 3 weeks or we're sending you back to Memphis.
It's death, taxes, and me being moderately intrigued by the St. Louis Cardinals lineup every single year. Yeah. And it's somewhere between moderate and very. But I was going into last year and I was saying, oh, if Gorman hits and if Donovan hits and if Nootbaar hits. And now I'm saying if Sajazi hits and if Scott looks passable and all of these things, it could.
Herrera, look at Herrera's big league numbers.
Herrera, I'm already banking on him hitting. And I'm just looking at a really bad division, man. And I'm saying, okay, again, there's a non-zero chance that you guys just hang around.
Yeah. Quinn Matthews gets up there. Tink Hence gets up there. I get it, but that's even more reason for me where I'm like, man, you don't need to trim payroll that much. You can lean into the young thing, but you don't need to be dumping Sonny Gray. It's not going to happen anyway now because of the no trade clause. Right. But you don't need to do all that. Right. You could have a young team balanced out with some vets that surprises people.
Yeah, you don't need to move Fetty at this point. I personally would not be moving Fetty if I were them. If you can move Mats for anything, I would do that in a heartbeat. But having Gray and Fetty at the top, and then you fill that out, like you're saying with Quinn Matthews and Tink Hence, all of a sudden, this team, at least in August, you may not be in contention for a division title or a wild card berth, but you can at least see the vision beyond. Yeah. And I know Fetty comes off the books, but at the end of the day, man, you see the vision.
And they have a ton of solid 5-starter types in AAA too, which pitching depth is a name of the game as well. And it could be next man up between McGreevy, who surprisingly showed pretty well at the big league level. Graceffo has decent stuff. Yep. You have Sam Robertsa. There's a lot of guys that and we'll see. Hopefully Roby will be healthy and there's no doubt in his stuff. It's a team that, look, if they're not playing well and the young guys aren't quite rising to the occasion, sure, dump Fetty in June. But, I don't think they should fully go into the season looking like it's a rebuild year.
No.
And Mason Wynn potentially taking that all-star leap is a huge part of that.
Right. I was going to say, because you got guys like Mason Wynn in the fold. Okay, we're going to get into the top 10 in a moment. Before that, our first break. The constant question, odds or evens?
I'll go odds because I think I was the lowest ranker on the first even.
Okay, fair. You were 13 on our number 10 guy.
Yeah.
Our number 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball for 2025 is Carlos Correa of the Minnesota Twins. You had him at 13. I had him in the double digits at 11. Leo had him at 10. Peter had him at 7. Fink had him at 8. Eric had him at 9. So he settles in where Leo ranked him. Correa was awesome in 2024, albeit 86 games. In half the season, he hit .310 with 14 homers, a 155 WRC plus, and I rubbed my eyes and I was like, did Jay Staff, who's another one of our, great new young writers at justbaseball.com, did he typo this? A 4.3 F4 in 86 games? No, that's what Correa did. He was a 4.5 win player. Do his feet work, Aram?
Yeah, that's the question. I in hindsight, could be a little bit harsh on him, but I'm just concerned. This is year 2 or year 3, actually, that we have 3 seasons now under our belt of the Correa experience after the failing multiple physical situation and stuff like that. First year was great. Second year, very banged up. Third year looked like he was the guy from the first year, if not better, and then just can't really stay on the field at all again. So it's just really difficult when it's a health side of things for me, because we're projecting for next season as well. And when we start to get into all the other names, it's a lot of players that either have just been a little bit more consistent, or are younger and can take a leap, or are coming off of a full really good season for the most part, until we get to maybe 1 or 2 others that have similar questions. But it was encouraging in one respect to see Correa swinging it the way that he was
Yeah.
after such a bad 2023.
Right.
But I felt like we couldn't fully disregard the 2023 either, right? Like if we're going to give him credit, which we should, I mean, ridiculous, 310, 388, 517 slash line, 86 games. But if you're going to lean into that, also have to pay attention to the 135 games where he had a 95 WRC plus. And I'm sure he was hurt during that time too.
Yeah.
But if that's what we finally got healthy Correa for 86 games, we also lost it again too. What are we going to get in 2025? I don't know. And this position is too talented for me to play the I don't know game. And that's just kind of where I'm at.
I'm 100% with you. It's a weird one, man, because you look at the WAR output and you just look at the defensive metrics that it coincided with that 23 season. It was like, okay, it was all really not great. And then this year, all of a sudden, it was great again. And, it's not like he was 85 WRC plus and then 140 and then 95 and then 155. It was 133, 139, and then 95 and then 155.
Yep.
So he was really good. I think the optimists, Peter, would be looking at 23 as just a year from hell, and you recalibrate, and he looked awesome in 24, and you just hope he stays healthy in 25. But I do lean farther towards you where I'm saying, okay, I need you to stay on the field, and I need you to be really good because we're now 2 seasons removed from you, A, being on the field, and B, being really good.
Yeah, and the plantar fasciitis thing is just weird because it results in, that's usually from other issues. And remember, he has a lot of ankle issues, and that was why the physicals were the way that they were. I know from Derek Falvey, Twins president of baseball operations, that he's tracking in a positive direction, apparently like ahead of schedule. He's got good plans for how he's going to handle it therapeutically, and I think he's in a good place. My thing, though, is I know a big part of his value is the defensive ability at shortstop.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder, and you got to figure out how to do this, but like if it's worth trying to run him through like different positions here and there to try to preserve him. Is he going to, you can't DH him too much because that you have the Buxton situation as well.
You can't play third because Royce Lewis, when he's healthy, is playing third base because you already moved him off at short. Like you have so many shortstops that are getting moved off a shortstop in Minnesota.
So that's why he's going to keep playing short. But I'm like, if you have a foot issue, like there's no position that's more quick burst and laterally demanding than shortstop. So it's a tough spot for him to be in. Hopefully he can manage it all and it all takes care of itself. And like, we're going to talk about the next guy. If you run 1,000 simulations of like the 2025 season, there's going to be a lot more where Correa has higher WAR outputs than the next guy we're going to talk about, Dansby Swanson. But there's also going to be a lot more where he is significantly lower. And there's going to be a lot more where Dansby Swanson's between 3 and 4 wins. And that's why for me, I had to go with the safer commodity when I was, ranking these guys.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, man. And it's funny. Was it a Cubs convention? No, it was earlier. It was early December that he mentioned that he had been playing through a sports hernia for a while. And does that mean 99 WRC plus? I'm not sure. We know that Dansby kind of had that fever dream offensive year in his contract year, and that's what net him over $170 million. But at the end of the day, you're getting an elite defender that is probably going to be an average hitter. He and Nico Horner are kind of sort of the same thing.
Yeah. And I don't know if Correa is that elite defender anymore. I think he can be fine, solid. And maybe when he's feeling really good, he's back to a really solid defender. Yeah. But is he a 20 outs above average, 20 DRS guy?
No.
I don't think so. And we haven't really seen that at all, since he's been in Minnesota. If you average out the 3 seasons, I think from the analytical perspective, he's probably been just about average. And then I'd give him, the edge because the instincts are so good and he's just going to do all the little things at the position. So he's just slightly above average defender maybe at this point at shortstop.
Yeah.
More pressure on him to hit. And, he really did swing it well last year, but this is a guy he's not hitting 30 home runs.
Yeah.
So that's the other wrinkle in it too.
And on the other side, Dansby is as good of a defensive shortstop, as good of a defensive player as we may have in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. Which leads me into number 9, which is Dansby Swanson of the Chicago Cubs. Not a great offensive year, but you see the value there where because of that glove, even when he slashes 242, 312, 390, as you said, 99 WRC plus, it's a 4.3 F4.
Yeah.
And you figure, especially playing through that sports hernia, but also just probably naturally just if he's a few ticks better offensively, it's so easy to see him inch closer to that 5-win season. And when you're a 5-win shortstop, like pretty easy to feel good about that. And this is a guy that you got to look at the last 3 years, right? Final year in Atlanta that got him paid 6.6 F4. Yeah. Everybody talks about it because it's this career year, right? 117 WRC plus. Like, oh no, are you going to be buying at the top of the market? We talked about it a ton on the show. And I think you were expecting, a 10% dip in offense and, him to be a 4 or 5-win player. It's exactly what he was in his first year in Chicago, right? A 106 WRC plus. He hit 22 home runs and he was a 5 F4 guy. And then last year, which was a quote unquote down year offensively, but, was closer to what we saw in the earlier years of his career. The defense was still so sustainably good that he was a 4-win player at shortstop. So for me, I thought last year was kind of what I think the worst case scenario will be for the next couple of years, which is if the offense is just stalled out at league average, you're just going to have an elite defender who's now become a little bit more of a factor on the base paths, career high 19 bags last year on 22 tries. And, is going to run into some homers here and there. And again, just continue to play phenomenal defense. The expected stats were a little bit better as well. And guys like this is where I'll look at the X numbers a little bit more, because you're not asking him to make this massive leap. You're asking for the X numbers to kick in to bump his overall offensive numbers by 4 or 5%. Yep. And all of a sudden, a guy like him is again knocking on the door of a 5-win season. So for me, just the floor being so high, a slight uptick offensively, and he's a 2020 guy. It's just very comforting to have a guy like Dansby Swanson as your shortstop, I think.
It's funny, man. He's a more positive version of the Patrick Bailey conversation. We talk about Pat Bailey. If you are an average offensive piece, you're a 6-win player. That's Dansby, man. If you are an average offensive player, we learned he's a 4.5-win shortstop. And now we're just asking on that slight tick up to make him 5, exactly what you're pointing to. I think Dansby Swanson is vanilla ice cream. Sometimes it's really good.
Yeah.
I do like a scoop of vanilla ice cream sometimes. And I know that I can always turn to vanilla ice cream and be okay with that. I want a little sweet treat. That's that opportunity to just get it. Are there things that I like more? Yeah. There were, I think, 9 guys that I liked more, or 8 guys that I liked more. But man, it's still really solid. He's absolutely, and I understand the frustration of Cubs fans because he was an $177 million player, but sometimes it's okay to have vanilla ice cream at short.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy because it's still a good, enjoyable treat, right? I think for him too, I think that abdomen issue sport attorney, that's going to affect your quickness in the box, I think, and your ability to rotate. And I don't know exactly in what ways, but this is a guy that in 2023 OPS'd over 1,000 against four-seamers. And it's not like he is aging. He's 30. It was his age 30 season, but that OPS dropped by 200 points, more than 200 points against four-seamers. I just wonder how much of that was just quickness and feeling right and whatever. And just getting more comfortable at hitting four-seamers like he has for much of his career, I think will allow him to rake and be more than solid. So,
and I'd assume it was a decent bit of it that was related to that sports hernia. But let's get to number 8, and he needed a bounce back really badly, and he got it. Number 8 was Trey Turner of the Philadelphia Phillies. I had him at 8. You did too. Peter did too. Eric did too. Fink and Leo had him at 9. I don't really get it. 121 games, hit 295 with 21 homers and 19 bags. It was a 124 WRC plus and a 3.9 win season for Trey Turner. The defense, I didn't realize was as average as it was until he got to LA. And when he played that year in Los Angeles, I watched a ton of Dodgers and I was like, oh, he makes a couple more mistakes than I was expecting for a guy this smooth. It's weird that he's an average defender because the eye test, he passes it with flying colors. But offensively, there are very few shortstops that have been as consistent over the last decade as Trey Turner has been. Trey's only a couple years removed from being a top 3 shortstop in the game, top 2 shortstop in the game. But the reason we're talking about him here, I don't really think is an indictment on Trey Turner. This is a $300 million player who's getting paid through his age 40 season. He entirely deserves that. I think it's more of a testament to the young guard of shortstops coming through. Like, we haven't talked about Ellie. We haven't talked about Gunnar. We haven't talked about Bobby Witt. Trey was the best before those guys showed up, and he's still really good. Him and Seager are falling by the wayside right now, but man, like, he's awesome.
He's a speed-oriented guy that I think when he's at the peak of his powers is, a superstar. But I think it also resulted in his offensive abilities being slept on a little bit too, right? Yes, as he slows down, he's maybe not going to impact the game to the same level of this like game wrecker that he was when he was one of the fastest players in the game. He can still motor too, like don't get it twisted, but it's just not exactly the same. But this is still a good hitter, right? Like this is a guy that hits the ball harder than I think people give him credit for, has a great feel to hit, pulls the ball in the air enough to hit those 20, especially in that ballpark, like 20 to 25 home runs. And, we've even seen him inch close to 30, but since he's been in Philly, even in the frustrating first year, hit 26 homers and stole 30 bags. Got back to not striking out nearly as much and got it back under 20%. So all of those things are what you love to see. I do have some questions about the glove now. I do think like as he ages a little bit, it might get a little bit more questionable. And that's when you look at like the defensive run save perspective, it was his worst season. But then when you look at the range stuff and things like that, he grades out as average. So I think for him, like it just seems to be sometimes like the fundamental stuff where it just, you just boots more balls than you would expect. So I don't know what the long-term plan is there for him. It seems like he makes sometimes the difficult plays. And then you're looking at like this is a guy where fielding percentage actually may be like a fair thing to cite, which, I don't like to.
Right.
So that's the one side is like, how does the glove continue to look there? Mm-hmm. But this is still a dude that's going to give you solid bat to ball. You're getting almost at 300.
Yeah.
Still at least average power, which has always been slept on with him. And he's going to steal bags. It wasn't as much last year, but also was a little banged up, only played 121 games. I feel pretty confident that he's going to go 2020 next year again and hitting the high 200s.
I wonder what the pivot is when he gets into his mid-30s and maybe loses the step in order to play shortstop at a decently high level or even an average level. Is it just flip-flop him and Stott? I know Stott might be hitting the open market by that
Yeah,
point,
I would say probably put him at second and go outside for a new shortstop option.
I guess, and it does kind of stink that they're going to be paying a second baseman that much money through their late 30s, but it's what the Phillies signed up for, man. You gave him $300 million.
Yeah, I mean, you know what though? If he's doing this, in perpetuity, which I think he can, then I don't think you're losing too much sleep over it because from an AAV perspective, it's not terrible. And by the time you get to 2028, 2029, 2030, it's going to fall further and further down the spot track leaderboards there in terms of AAV.
Yeah.
Get to number 7 here. And number 7, it's a guy coming off a heck of a year. And it was kind of even across the board, except for one dissent, Peter Apple. Willy Adames of the San Francisco Giants. 7s across the board. Peter had him at 9. Of course, just signed that big deal with San Francisco, coming off of, I would probably say career year, right? I mean, 161 games, 251, 331, 462 slash line, 32 homers, 21 bags. He drove in 112, a 119 WRC plus, and a 4.8 F4. Naturally, Adames is probably going to take a little bit of a hit on the surface level stats when playing in San Francisco. But Jay actually pointed out a really important thing in the article here, which of course is linked in the episode description. If you look at Adames' spray charts, he's built to be able to maintain his production in San Francisco. He doesn't get cheated on his home runs, first of all. But second of all, he pulls the ball in the air with authority, but also generates just tons of backspin consistently. And that's why I think when you look at the way he drives the ball, I don't think he's going to be impacted too significantly by that ballpark. I do think he can still threaten to be that first 30 home run hitter since Bonds there. Another guy that has a unique dichotomy between defensive run saved and outs above average. But when I see that in a 1-year sample, I'm going to defer to the previous 4 years And the previous 4 years, he has consistently graded out as a strong defender in the eyes of both stats, at least in the last two, if you want to more specifically look at that. So I still think can pick it well at short. But when you're getting the power now that he's getting in, and they need that there, walked more than as much as he ever really has the last 2 years in his career. It just seems like he's a safe bet to give you. It's offensive minded, I think, a little bit more at this point, but a safe bet to give you a 115, 120 WRC plus. I think solid defense and career high 21 bags. That was more than double he's ever had before with a career high 32 homers and the most available he's ever been. It's coming off of a year where I think he's really bolstered his stock.
I don't know what weird substance Peter was on when he was doing these rankings, but 9 is kind of crazy to me. This guy was 5th in WAR among shortstops in 24, and he was like 7th in WRC plus among shortstops, and he was playing at a hitter-friendly ballpark, but WRC plus accounts for park factor.
Yeah,
he is so he's near flawless to me when I watch him. And yeah, does he K a little bit more than your typical shortstop? Sure, but he was like that steady presence that I don't think Milwaukee knew that they were getting when they made that deal with Tampa. He comes over. Clearly, the drop was an issue for him in terms of sight lines and all that jazz. But I mean, we're looking at a guy who's been as steady and as productive of an offensive shortstop as we've had since stepping foot in Milwaukee. Yeah. And there are guys that have been doing it, that are younger. They've been doing it for a shorter period of time. Like I'm thinking about Lindor, but Adames kind of falls into that bucket where what you're getting every year from him since he's been in Milwaukee.
And I have more faith in those guys being able to continuously do that when you talk about average launch angle on hard hit baseballs, like a guy like him that can backspin the baseball the way that he does. His average launch angle on 95 plus is 24 degrees. It's a ground ball rate of 31% overall. Like he's going to create carry to all fields, specifically the pull side too. He's going to get his home run wise. He's patient hitter enough that he's going to draw his walks, and he has a good enough field to hit where I think that strikeout rate's still going to stay, right around where we've become accustomed to. I think the biggest variable in his WAR is going to be how the advanced metrics like his defense, but I have confidence in him having a better year in the eyes of DRS when you look at the last 3 years where he's been great in that regard. And then the last 2 years before that, he had a combined 26 outs above average. So I imagine the metrics will agree with him a little bit more going into next year if history is any indicator.
I think so as well. Let's get to number 6 here. And number 6 is Corey Seager of the Texas Rangers. And Seager he got 4 of 6 sixth place votes. You, me, Eric, and Fink all had him at 6. Leo had him at 5. Peter had him at 5. I understand why they had him at 5. 123 games, he was a 4.5 win player, and he had a 140 WRC plus. His home run totals since going to Texas on that huge deal, 33, 33, 30. His WRC pluses since going to Texas, 117, 171, 140. The problem for me, and I think the problem for you too, that makes him 6 instead of 5, is his games played totals, 151, 119, 123. Has he been amazing since becoming a Texas Ranger? Yes. Has he missed 80 games over the last 2 years? Yes.
That's the biggest problem. And if we're going to, knock Carlos Correa for that, I think you got to knock Seager to a degree as well. And
be relative with it. We are relative with it. He's 6,
relative with it because Seager's also averaging 32 bombs a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, when he is dialed in, I think there's few hitters that are more feared. I think 2023, Corey Seager in that World Series, and that year is going to be baked in. Mostly I'm looking at last year, but we're looking at the year before as well. And that guy had a 171 WRC plus the year before, right? That guy, his swing is one of the gold standards in terms of the way he moves in the box. He slugged 623. And I think you saw some of the power sapped when he first, came back from injury and was dealing with that. But then you saw it start to really come back again. It's a guy that's going to slug over 500. I think we've become accustomed to that now too. And the defense too, that was a little bit of a question at points. He's graded out well defensively since he's been over in Texas and is at least an average defender there, maybe slightly above that. If this guy's healthy for a full season, he's got a case as a top 3 or 4 shortstop in the game. And he's a guy that could win an MVP if he can play 162. The problem is the last 4 seasons, he's averaging 120 games. And it's not like he was, an Iron Man before that. That's not even factoring in skipping 2020, where he did play 52 of 60 games. 2019, he played 134. 2018, he played 26. So, yeah, you saw him available in the first 2 seasons of his big league career, but for the most part, he has missed around 30, 40, 50 games for more seasons than he hasn't. So that's the frustrating part of it there. I think this is a contract that's going to age well also, because as he ages, you just assume he can stay healthy. He's going to clearly hit his home runs. But that's the big reason why he gets kind of the edge over Correa, I think, is defensively, they're unfortunately closer now because of the Correa foot issues and things like that. And it seems like the injuries that Seager has don't seem to affect him in the field as much. It's another guy that was dealing with hip and hernia stuff as well, though. So I'm interested to see what it all looks like when he comes back. And the injury side of things is still somewhat of a concern, but the way he has swung it since joining Texas is pretty absurd.
Okay. You talk to as many pro hitters as anybody that I know. Seager is obviously, you mentioned it, one of the gold standards of swing. When you ask guys your favorite swing to watch in the big leagues, who are the answers? I always hear Seager, Yelich, Jordan, Judge.
Seager's one that gets a lot more, it's one of those that I think outwardly people may not think would get brought up as much. Seager comes up a ton, a ton. Soto, just because of the way he comports himself in the at-bats as well, right? Where it's like, how did he spit on that? And then how did he spoil that? And then how did he get to that, where he's elevating a pitch that was more than 2 balls down? So Soto is definitely one that just continues to come up. And then Gunnar at this point, because what hitters that I've talked to that they seem to marvel at the most is, how is he so still yet so violent, right? Where his hands don't travel much. He picks up the foot and puts it down, yet he is doing that kind of damage and creating that kind of force. Like, everybody wishes they could be that still before their swing and not be stiff. Right. Like, that's the dream, right? But most people, if they're that still, will become stiff and won't be as malleable with their swing or powerful. So Gunnar is a name that I keep seeing come up more and more and more, that people are just trying to watch how he moves in the box.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Arias too. As much as people like to hate on Arias because of the value or lack thereof from the defensive side of things or the lack of power, that guy's swing is a reason why he hits 340.
If you're trying to put bat on ball, he Ks 4% of the time. Obviously you watch him.
But he swings just like successful power hitters do too. It isn't like he's chopping the ball on the ground and just selling out for line drives. His swing is geared for lift. He just handles the barrel so well that his lift is line drives in the gap. That's another swing that even guys that are power hitters are looking at and seeing the way that he moves, because he catches everything.
Yep. Fair. Into the top 5 in a moment, but one more quick break.
Number 5, I have a feeling this guy's not going to be at 5 the next time we do this. Elly De La Cruz of the Cincinnati Reds checks in at the 5 spot. It was 4 from you. You were the high guy. 5 from me. Peter and Leo Morgenstern, the low guys, having him in the 6th spot. 160 games last year for Elly. 259, 339, 471 slash line, 25 homers, 67 stolen bases, a 118 WRC plus, and a 6.4 F4. This is a guy that I continue to emphasize this. People talk about the errors because those are the things that you're going to see. And I get it. If you're watching the games, you're going to remember the error and you're going to forget the backhand in the hole that he made the play look easy because he is insanely rangy and has a 70, maybe an 80 arm, and just made it look like a semi-difficult backhand, whereas most infields that would have went through the 6 hole for a base hit. Those cancel each other out. An error and then making a play that would be a hit 80% of the time almost cancels each other out. Definitely you do it twice outweighs the one error. He did it a bunch of times for every error he made. And that's why he is a plus defender. If I have another if I have another random like faceless account tweet at me and say, oh, he made 30 whatever errors, like he's not a good defender. Errors are, I can't believe the new age is trying to tell me that error. Of course they matter to a degree. But again, this is a rare example where you have a player that is making plays that nobody makes. And then the fundamentals, yeah, he's 6'5" and he's a freak athlete that sometimes moves too quick for his body. He's very young. He's going to get more refined with his hands and his actions, and the errors will go down. What you can't teach is the freakish ability to get to balls and finish plays that nobody else can get to. You can teach the attacking ground balls so they don't eat you up, or just being a little bit more fundamentally sound with your hands and picking balls in the right spot. That's my one tangent, because I don't need to tell you about how fast or how hard he hits the ball. He's going to have better than a 118 WRC plus next year too. I feel pretty confident about that.
Terry Francona isn't taking this job with Joe Schmo at shortstop, man. Like when Tito was asked why he got back into managing, I mean, this was one of the first reasons that popped up in all of these interviews. I have comically lofty goals for Ellie De La Cruz in 2025. Top 5 in WAR, top 5 in jersey sales. Those are my goals for him. Yeah. And I think it's doable. And we could be looking at Fanatics jersey sales at the end of the 25 season being Ohtani 1, Skeens 2, De La Cruz 3. And I wouldn't be shocked.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
That's the talent we've got here. He could swipe 80 bags, he could hit 35 homers, and he could play plus defense.
Yep.
Okay, he's going to K a little bit more than your average shortstop. I don't care. I love him. Love him.
Yeah. I think it's very cool. And that's the other thing that people like to point out. Like it's like an old head thing. I think like the old heads will hate on Ellie a little bit. Like there's players where I look at strikeout rate and I'm like, okay, that could be an indicator of him maybe not having sustainably good offensive ability. Like it could be volatile. He doesn't chase egregiously. He strikes out because he's 6'5" and just a gargantuan human who swings hard. He runs a 90th percentile exit velocity of 109 miles per hour. It's one of the higher figures in Major League Baseball. The contact rates are average. It's fine. And he's a switch hitter. The biggest problem for him, and a big reason why I think he ends up striking out a little bit more is the right-handed swing's a little bit behind the left-handed swing. Fine. The left-handed swing is extremely productive. At 876 OPS from the left side, he's going to hit 2/3 of the time from the left side anyways. So, yeah, if he strikes out 30% of the time, it is what it is. But I do think it's worth mentioning that in his age 22 season, he upped his walk rate by nearly 2%, and he cut his strikeout rate by more than 2%. If he does that again, or even half of that, right? If he ups his walk rate by another tick and cuts his strikeout rate by another tick, he's not far off from some of the other top power hitters in the game when it comes to strikeout to walk rate. And that's all you need for a guy like him, because he doesn't need to be a 140 WRC plus. So he doesn't need to hit 40 home runs to be productive. He probably will. And he can, and that's why he's going to end up being a superstar. But that's the big side of it as well that I think kind of gets overlooked. And he's a guy that's going to consistently, even when he mishits balls, beat him out because he's one of the fastest players in the game. And then when he hits balls hard consistently, it's just going to be a higher BABIP guy in general as well. Yeah. I got all the confidence in the world that he's just going to continue to get better and continue to turn into this budding superstar that we see. And I just excited to enjoy watching him play this coming season, because I was mentioning it like when he was a prospect in the lower levels, and like, Jason Dominguez is top 10 prospect in baseball right now. I think he should be considered that. But we always talk about how the expectations for Dominguez are unfair. And I think a few months ago, Clay Snowden, one of our writers, sent me a segment that I had like from years ago on one of the shows that he was doing, he had set me up with. It was a Reds show, and like I didn't even remember saying it, but I had mentioned that Ellie De La Cruz is everything that Jason Dominguez was supposed to be. And I wasn't saying that from the lens of like Jason Dominguez isn't good. It was the ridiculous comps that were so outlandish that it was unfair. Like, I think you could have applied those to Ellie De La Cruz and it wouldn't have been outlandish. Like this guy could be a blend of Mickey Mantle and this and that. Obviously I don't think he's going to be that. But when you say like alien, like The Martian.
Yeah.
This guy truly is an alien talent. We've never really seen the arm strength, the power, the speed, and the ability to play shortstop like this. That makes him the Martian to me. Whereas Jason Dominguez is just pretty powerful, toolsy guy that could be a really good ball player for a long time.
Yeah. The way that I look at Ellie is, okay, who can join these made up clubs that Acuna created in that
Yeah.
2023 season?
Yeah, the 40, 60, whatever the hell.
40-70 club. Like, okay, he's the first one because, of course, nobody's ever done that. 40-40, I think there are plenty of guys in Major League Baseball that can actually go 40-40. And I think Bobby Witt is one of those guys that can go 40-40. I think there are a bunch of guys like that. But a bunch is relative. I think there are probably 10 guys in Major League Baseball that could have that in the tank. But when I think about these like 40-70 seasons, it's Acuna, obviously. And then the second name that jumps to my mind is Ellie De La Cruz, man. Like, I'm thinking about who else. Maybe Bobby Witt's in that conversation. I think Corbin Carroll could be in that conversation, although 40 is a real stretch.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch.
But like 30-70, he could do 30-70, but 40 is a different beast. I do think that it's Acuna and Ellie. Ohtani, sure, because I don't want to set caps on that guy. But who else is even in that conversation?
No.
That's the type of talent we're talking about.
That's why I think he's the true Martian. That did end up making sense. But like, I mean, you can't put a cap on this guy, and that's why I can't wait to see what he does this coming season, especially in Cincinnati. If he starts hitting the ball in the air a little bit more too, start using that stadium to his advantage, who knows how many home runs he can hit.
Right. Let's get to number 4 here. And number 4 is the new shortstop, Mookie Betts of the LA Dodgers. Everybody had him at 4, but I had him at 5 because I trust Ellie defensively a little bit more than I trust Mookie Betts. 4.5 win season this past year in 116 games. He had a 141 WRC plus, 19 homers, and 75 runs driven in. Here's the thing. He was not great at short when they tried it early in 24. Who's to say that he's going to be top 4 at the position in 2025? I understand that I am coming at it from a pessimistic lens, but I can't close my eyes and see a world where Mookie's a better defender at short than Ellie De La Cruz. Can you?
Probably not, no. And like he was great in relative terms because it was like, holy crap, how is he just out there and like making plays? But you know, if you look at the range and just over 162, same conversation that we were just having. Like fundamentally, it's impressive how Mookie Betts is able to, make all the plays and things like that. But there's going to be a lot more balls in the 6 hole that Ellie gets to that are just going to sneak through past Mookie. And that adds up. That is, somewhat valuable. The flip side is Mookie Betts offensively has been one of the models of consistency in Major League Baseball over the last decade, and I don't expect that to change. And last year's injury, total fluke thing, right? You get hit on the wrist hand by a pitch. I'm not going to be like, injury.
He misses time. He's fragile.
Yeah, no. He had a little bit of stretches here and there when he was banged up in the bat, but for the most part, he's been very available. You look at 142 games in 2022, 152 in 2023, and then again getting hit in the hand. Hit a 7-7 F4 season, almost hit 40 home runs. And also, you talk about hitting balls at optimal angles. Mookie's not going to let it up EV-wise, but that guy has mastered the ability to pull the ball in the air and just outslug his exit velocities. And has really mastered it, surprisingly, in LA compared to, where he was playing in Boston, where we see 35 home runs and 39 home runs, like back-to-back seasons. That's career high followed by another career high. Yeah. Feel really good about the offensive side of things. I am a little bit, skeptical about how he holds up playing shortstop in his age 32 season, every single day. But I do think that they're probably going to do some things to make sure that he gets days off here and there. Yeah. I would hope so, considering, and I've talked about this on the show enough, but like we were at a point in time a year and change ago, 2 years ago, where it's, we're going to move Mookie to preserve him. And then it's, shit, we got to put him back at short.
Yeah.
Don't love that thought process there. It makes it hard for me to be excited about him then moving to one of the most physically demanding positions. But I got all the faith in the world in his ability.
So me too, but I'm just thinking about the margins of number 6 on this list to number 3 on this list. And They're so razor thin. So I'm looking at Ellie and I'm looking at Mookie side by side, and I'm saying, okay, Mookie is probably going to have the better offensive season by 10 WRC plus points, but
At least.
at
Yeah.
least, right? Let's say 10 to 20. Okay. How much value is there defensively there? I'm sure spending an entire offseason getting ready to play shortstop, he will be at least 70% of the defender at shortstop Ellie De La Cruz is. But based on what I've seen, what's available to me, I have more faith in Ellie outwarring Mookie Betts if Mookie plays short every single time he touches the field this year.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible. And I guess the flip side would be the last full healthy season we saw from Mookie in 23.
Yeah,
he was almost an 8-win player who hit 40 bombs.
Yeah.
So what you're getting with Mookie, and I feel confident, in what we're getting with Ellie De La Cruz at this point. But Mookie, it's like you can Sharpie different. That in health dependent, and so that's the one side of it. And 118 WRC plus is good stuff, but like the big leap to 160,
yeah, it is
like we saw. But the flip side is like, it was a 6.5 win season last year from Ellie De La Cruz, and like because the metrics obviously love the range and the things that he does there. But I do think that I will put my slight old head cap on, where like I don't care too much about how you make your outs. But when you're walking nearly as much as you're striking out, like Mookie does, and just continuously putting together ridiculously good at bats, I do think Mookie is one of those guys that, I hate saying this, but like it does kind of go beyond the box score to a degree, where it's just the way that he sets the table and the way that he can just fill in and do different things and impact the game. It's a rare ability.
You sound like me, man. You're getting washed. The old guard, welcome. It's fun here. It's a little bit warmer.
Yeah. Should I talk about his? I don't even know. I don't even know what else to talk about. Batting average would be the only area I could really harp on here.
You just gotta go buy some toothpicks after the episode.
The way that he can just control every AB is pretty crazy, and the power uptick really has sold me as well. But I don't think you can go wrong either way here. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
No. But let's get into, I think, a decently clear-cut top three.
I do. I agree with that.
One. Yeah.
Number 3 is, I can already see the Mets fans commenting, and I hear you. Francisco Lindor checks in at 3. Ryan Finkelstein had him at 2, but he wasn't alone. Peter Apple also had him at 2. Clean sweep of 3 the rest of the way. I think you can make the case that Lindor's 2024 season, especially with the playoffs and everything, was better than Gunner's. But we'll also remember we're projecting for next year too, and this is another year where Gunner's going to take another step forward potentially. Lindor just had his best season since Cleveland, and I think he can match that. But is he going to take a step above that? Maybe. I don't know. I'd have more confidence in the young hitter with power continuing to progress. That said, Lindor hit for power this year, man. 273, 344, 500 slash line, 152 games, 33 homers, 137 WRC plus and a 7.8 F4. He's one of the best defenders in the game, no matter what the metrics say. And he's just another guy that is beyond the box score, right? Like he's got pitch comm in his ear. He's setting himself up in places where like he's not going to get the credit for the range, but like he put himself in positions because he knows how to read swings and has the pitch comms where he's making a lot of plays that other guys just wouldn't even be in the vicinity of where that ball is. Coming up so big every time the Mets needed a big swing, he had it. But this is for the regular season and overall and moving into next year as well. And we'll get into number 2, which you can put it together. It's going to be Gunner. But just focusing on Lindor, I think we see, and this is what we've kind of been waiting on in terms of like the difference between him being, really solid shortstop, really solid all-star shortstop to MVP candidate.
Yeah.
The difference is the slug, and just seeing him slug 500 for the first time since 2019 in Cleveland, like with his skill set, when he's slugging 500, he's an MVP candidate. When he's slugging 450, 460, 470, he's an all-star and a really good one. But that's the difference here, and that's why we saw him come off of again he matched his 2018 season where he had a 7.8 F4 over there in Cleveland with the 33 homers, 38 there. But he did a lot of other things this past season that I think stood out.
It's so funny looking at the last 3 years for Francisco Lindor because games played totals are 161, 160, 152. Ninth in MVP voting in 2022. No All-Star. Ninth in MVP in 23, a Silver Slugger. No All-Star. Second in MVP and a Silver Slugger. No All-Star. He is more, I don't want to say underrated because he is the face of the New York Mets and they're a huge franchise and you can make the Soto argument all you want. Soto is entering Lindor's clubhouse. Like that's his team. And I think it's very clear that it was not Pete Alonso's team at this point. It's Lindor's team. But I think Lindor might still be the most underrated player in Major League Baseball. I think it's Lindor and Kyle Tucker because I want to shake so many people and say, you don't understand the level of superstar we have here with Francisco Lindor. And that's who he is, man. An elite defender, threat for 30-30 every single year. And he put a team on his back, willing them to the postseason this year. Unlike most of what I've seen in the last decade of Major League Baseball, I'm thinking
with a bad back.
With a bad, put the team on his bad back
with a bad
and
back.
willed him to the postseason. But I'm thinking about Harper in his MVP year. Like that's the other guy where I think, okay, you literally carried a team to the postseason. That's what Lindor did in 24, and a ton of respect to you there. But we're forecasting for 25, and I side with the young guy. I don't feel good about it. I'm with you. No. I see all these replies, and I'm like, I agree. I hear you. But man, it's tough. And again, this is so clearly tier one. It's just razor thin.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the most important thing is like you have the podium here of the top three, and they're in their own realm with what they're able to do. And look, I think it's as simple as this. If like, and maybe people would disagree, but going into next season, if you ask like who's going to have the better slash line and better and higher FWAR, I think most people would vote Gunnar Henderson. At least I'd imagine. And that's even factoring in the defense. If Gunnar didn't make the leap defensively he made last year as well, I think you just side with the solidly high floor and then elevated ceiling that we just saw with Lindor. But I think you're going to see Gunnar get closer to Bobby Witt territory, which we'll get there too in a second. Like there's some rare things there. But what's kind of lost with Gunnar here is he had because of Bobby as well, he had one of the best shortstop seasons we have seen since 2000. Gunnar Henderson did by himself. Like it's A-Rod, it's Bobby Witt's 2024, and it's Gunnar Henderson's 2024. That's it since 2000. And I'll add more context to that later. But like, that's what I'm looking at where I'm like, okay, this is a guy that is still extremely young and is only going to get better. Like, again, I think what we saw from Lindor, he might just keep matching that. And there you go, on his way to the Hall of Fame.
And he's been matching it for a while now.
This was like the step up for Lindor. The best
version of matching it. Like it was matching it and then you add another 5% or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just saw the second full season of Gunnar Henderson, and he just broke out into superstardom. What's the third season look like? And maybe there's a little bit too much baked in progression there. Maybe that was Mac. Maybe he tapped into a ceiling at age 23.
Yeah.
Very possible. But I would like to imagine that he hasn't yet.
Yeah. The frilly setup for Gunnar Henderson is he is the second best shortstop in Major League Baseball. And his 2024 campaign, you're saying like up there with A-Rod and Bobby Witt, 159 games, hit 281 with 37 homers, a 155 WRC plus, and an 8-win season. You alluded to it. I don't think anybody saw this defensively from Gunnar Henderson. And people saw this possible offensive output when he was the number 1 or number 2 prospect in Major League Baseball or in minor league baseball. But did you think it was coming when he was 22 years old? I don't think anybody did.
I mean, no, not. He was a number 1 prospect for us, or number 2 prospect for us at a certain point, right before he debuted. But like, I don't know if I saw 40 homers in his second full season.
No, you would see you could see 30 to 35 homers in his 5th season when he figures out Major League Baseball, but 40 or 37, whatever it was, in his second season when he's 22.
and progressing into like a solid defender at the position as well. I
Solid
mean,
enough to be an 8-win player.
yeah,
Yeah.
8 F4. Like
Yeah.
that's insane. He stole 21 bags on 25 tries too. He could hit 50 home runs next year. It's very possible. Like I don't know if he's going to get pitched to enough, so it'll probably be closer to 40. But the other interesting conversation in this too is like Lindor, he had a really good age 22 season, really good age 23 season. His breakout, and it's the season that he finally matched this year, was his age 24 season in Cleveland, where he had the 7.8 F4, which he just matched this past year, and he hit the 38 homers. I think there's that age 24 season could be another step forward for Gunnar Henderson. And again, when you're talking about what is even a half step forward from what Gunnar Henderson did last year look like, a quarter step forward, that puts pressure on Bobby Witt Jr. for best season in baseball next year.
Yeah.
Even if Bobby Witt is exactly what he was this past year, which is, I think, the best shortstop season we've seen of this century. Like, that's the craziest part about it. So I'm excited. I think Gunnar's defense is only going to continue to progress too, as he just gets more comfortable navigating the spot and just reading hops and all the good stuff that comes with that, because we've just seen him steadily progress. Yeah. But he doesn't strike out that much for how much power he provides. The offense is crazy. And again, any little bit more offensively, he's comfortably in the Bobby Witt territory. Is just these two guys are going to be duking it out for MVPs, I think, for a long time in the American League.
I think so. And my favorite tinfoil hat theory that I've seen is the Dodgers are going to piecemeal Mookie and Freeland and Andrew Vargas together, or Emil Morales together, until they can pay Gunnar Henderson $750 million. That's my favorite conspiracy that I've seen in the last couple of months. It's like, oh, they're waiting for Gunnar. Oh, you're going to wait another 4 years? If they
I don't think they're thinking about that yet. Although they were apparently scouting Roki since high school, so who knows?
Dude, I mean, that would be ultimate Death Star type stuff, but I don't want to say he's just scratching the surface, because it feels like he did a lot more than scratch the surface with an 8-win season. It's like the difference between 99 and 100 on the mound. 99 is really hard. 100's different. Yeah. When you see a 6 leading the WAR, that's really good. When you see a 7 leading the WAR, that's amazing. But when you see 8 or 9 or 10, it's like, all right, you may be less man and more God. Yeah. I don't know what's going on here.
100%. And I think the last thing I'll add on Gunnar is the improved ability to hit lefties as well.
Yeah.
Like, that was a huge wrinkle that I think has really just made him this complete hitter this past year. And it an OPS over 800 left on left.
And it was probably the thing that held you back from him being 1 over Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
Carroll didn't have that. Gunnar did.
Yeah. And just Carroll seeming to be a little bit more dynamic defensively and things like that. But again, Gunnar has trimmed that gap clearly on that side of the ball. And then offensively, ain't no doubt about that at this point. Yep. Even though I do think Corbin's going to have a nice year this coming season.
Yep. Everybody's looking up, though.
Number one guy that, I mean, you can make the case is the best player in baseball and on the national or in the American League side at this point. Like, Bobby Witt Jr.'s 2024 season was the best shortstop season we have seen since 2000. And I don't think there's really any debating it. He slashed 332, 389, 588, 32 home runs, 31 stolen bases, 168 WRC plus, and a 10.4 F4 in a lineup where he had like minimal protection. Yes, Salvi was great. Your protection's a guy that swings at everything and grounds into a ton of double plays. And Vinny was out for a lot of the year. Like, there was really no reason to pitch to Bobby Witt Jr. and he had to be patient at points for sure. And for a guy that's as fast as he is, walked still at a decent clip, struck out only 15% of the time. But one of the biggest shocks to me and almost made me question myself and my ability to evaluate talent was when Bobby Witt struggled as a defender in the first year, because that was one of the easiest plus gloves, like plus fielding grades I'd put on a glove during, the scouting process and write-up process. In the 5-6 years that I've really been putting together the scouting reports. Yeah. And when he graded out that way, I'm like, what did I miss? Nothing. I think it was just he needed a little bit of time to get his feet under him. he's turned into one of the better defenders at shortstop in the game, especially from a range perspective. And it's a little bit of the Ellie conversation, but I would say he's even a little bit more mechanically sound where he's not booting balls at the same degree and just grading out now elite there. So when you're doing that on top of being a 30-30 guy, which by the way, in 2023, even through those, sometimes defensive inconsistencies or not walking much, he still was 30-49. But the biggest, I think, change and adjustment that we saw from Bobby this year that really leveled him to this point that we've seen where he's a 10-win player is that he's hitting for average, he's more selective, and then all of the freakish tools that we've always known that he's had are shining through as well. He's one of the best players in the game.
He popped a 117, 116.9 this past year. Average EV a 92.7. Was better than Marcelo Zuna, was better than Corey Seager, was better than Brent Rooker, was better than Ellie, was better than all these guys, Matt Olson. I'm just looking at average because he gets into it all the freaking time. You want to look at hard hit rate. He's going to be the leader for the next decade or so. He's always going to hit the ball hard. It's you look at Bobby Witt's year by year numbers, and there were initial concerns that he was swinging at absolutely everything, right? It was a sub 5% walk rate. And then in 23, that becomes 5.5% walk rate. It's oh, is this going to be an issue now? And then all of a sudden, you mentioned there was no reason to pitch to Bobby Witt. You worry that results in an elevated K rate, elevated chase rate, all that. He walks 2% more than he ever had before in his career in his first 2 years. And the K rate is at an all-time low. It feels like baseball is getting easier for him each year, which is funny. And it's kind of rare to actually watch unfold. But that's what I've felt watching Bobby Witt over the last 3 years. It's oh, he's just been getting more comfortable. Yep. And when more comfortable is a progression from a 2.5 win season to a 5.8 win season to a 10.5 win season, that's a pretty clear-cut example of somebody getting more comfortable.
Yeah. And if he's hitting for average, it's over.
Game over,
you're going to have some trouble.
Now, do you think third base and short, that timeshare where he played 50 games at third his first year, that could have screwed with him a little bit?
I hated it at the time. We talked about it. I absolutely do think it screwed with him. It's a totally different look. Yeah. You can get a little bit more comfortable sitting back on the ball. Yeah. And then you got to go back to shortstop where you have to attack everything off the bat. You attack the baseball. That's something Carson Williams talking about, the best defender at shortstop in the minor leagues. And Lindor talks about it all the time. You are attacking the ball. So it's not, attacking you, but at third base, you can get away with not doing that as much. And he's probably focused on trying to be more comfortable arm angle wise, footwork wise. And I absolutely think it messed with him. And it was crazy that they did that with their franchise cornerstone, but it worked out. He's where he needs to be and where he should be. And they've got their face of the franchise at third base now too, and Michael Garcia. So they're in a good spot. Only other thing I have here is since 2000, here are the best shortstop seasons in terms of F4. Bobby Witt Jr. at 10.4 this past year. Then you have 2002 Alex Rodriguez at 10. You have 2000 Alex Rodriguez at 9.5. You have 96 Alex Rodriguez at 9.2. You have 2003 Alex Rodriguez at 9.2. This is minimum 100 games played at shortstop because Bregman's 2019, where he's kind of moving around a little bit. He's actually at 8.3 as well. John Valentine in 95. So I wanted to go back to 1990 now as well. Sorry to confuse. So since 2000, Bobby Witt has the highest total in an individual year. Dialing it back to 1990, there's only one player who had a better individual season in the eyes of F4, Cal Ripken Jr. in 91, where he slashed 323, 374, 566 with 34 bombs and elite defense, and obviously played every game. That's crazy stuff. By the way, since 1990, Gunnar Henderson season's 9th best in the eyes of F4. 8th best if you don't count Bregman, because Bregman only played 60-something games at shortstop. So, first of all, Alex Rodriguez, I know the roids and everything. He's one of the best players to ever play the sport. I just want to remind people that. You can make the case he's a top 5 player of all time, even going back to Babe Ruth and all of those people who, would have thrown up seeing a Paul Skeen splinker. But I genuinely think Bobby Witt, the context to how exceedingly ridiculous he is lost sometimes. This is a guy that has a chance to be one of the best to ever do it. I don't want to put that on him after one season like this,
Yeah.
but just to put it in perspective, like he's on some A-Rod shit right now.
I love that context. And I mean, we talked about Fernando Tatis possibly being Alex Rodriguez. I think we have our Alex Rodriguez comp here in Bobby Witt Jr. And I'm
Yeah.
with you, man. We have to acknowledge that he's a top 10 player of all time. Like, you can't get away with not.
Yeah, you can put your asterisk, but in terms of production and abilities, like he's there, man.
It was there. What year did you say Cal Ripken? 91.
91.
Okay, so 1990, 91, he commit 11 errors. He still led all shortstops in fielding percentage, and he won a Gold Glove. He did not win a Gold Glove in 1990. He had 680 total chances. He made 3 errors as a shortstop.
Dude, that's a rabbit hole. Jeff Conine has the best examples of that because like teammates that he had that had been wronged or whatever. And like you start getting down the Gold Glove rabbit hole. Like you think Hall of Fame voting is frustrating, things like that. Some historic Gold Glove vote, like awards and things like that, just general award voting with Gold Glove stuff is comical.
Palmeiro. Rafael Palmeiro won a Gold Glove at first base and he played like 20 games at first base. He DH'd.
That's the craziest one. There's a lot of reasons why I think Omar Vizquel, is probably not a Hall of Fame candidate, but you should to cite the reasons why he should. Gold Glove is so stupid because it got to the point where like no matter what he did, it was gift wrapped for him every year. And like those guys, like that's why like I try to avoid those types of awards, MVP, things like that. But I don't know, like those kinds of like supplementary, like you just talked about with Lindor. How is that guy not an all-star in the last several years? Like,
I know.
Are we going to factor that into his Hall of Fame case? You should not at all. That's stupid.
But when you do the career synopsis, everybody's going to do it like a 4-time All-Star or something. No,
which I
get,
like
but it's like All-Star.
Like, come on, it doesn't matter.
I'm with you. All right, you got a last word? I have one real quick.
I do. I actually do.
Okay, give it to me.
How late is too late to have a Christmas tree out? There's a reason why I'm asking this.
Yeah, so we took ours down on Monday, so that was the 20th.
Oh. Okay, that's close to it. Honestly, that's
close
to it. It's pretty late.
We're recording on January 26th. I think if you still have it up right now, you might be in the wrong.
So I was walking and did not see a Christmas tree behind. Like it was laid out reaching over the sidewalk, and it was behind a garbage can, so I didn't really see it. Tripped, absolutely ate it. Like I can't believe I didn't split my chin open. Like it's really like bruised. You can't see the facial hair, but really bruised.
This is Florida that you did this?
Yeah, this was a couple of days ago.
Okay.
And like knuckle bloody, elbow bloody, knee bloody, smashed my watch that was like a gift years ago. Like got to get that buffed. Like absolutely ate it. And because I tried to catch myself and I picked up a whole tree with my legs, and then it just catapulted me further. Yeah. But then I was thinking about it, and I was like, I was pissed that the tree was sitting in the sidewalk, but I was more pissed at the fact that there was a tree out there. See, naturally, I do look out for trees up until January 15th, and my body is conditioned to stop looking for trees to step over. So my peripheral vision just didn't account for tree after January 15th. I think it's outrageous that one, somebody had a tree that long, and then two, put it out there on January 24th, 25th. Like people are not going to be prepared to look out for trees anymore. I high stepped during those 2 weeks in the beginning of January, and then I dragged my feet again, and it cost me dearly.
Yeah. So number one, have you ever considered adjusting your walking technique? Have you thought about high stepping year round?
I might need to.
Or are you a shuffler? Or are you just a shuffler?
I don't know, man. It absolutely killed. And like two girls saw it. One was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And the other one's like, "Don't embarrass him any further. Like, just let him." I was like, "Whoa, I'm not that embarrassed. That was really nice."
No, that's when you
like,
do the
like leave him alone.
Thing.
I was like,
you do the Family Guy thing, and you grab your knee and you just
yeah. No, you had to get up immediately and pretend you're good. But so please put your Christmas trees away by February at least.
Yeah, well, no
Please.
doubt, no doubt. I think January 20 we were really pushing it. We were supposed to do it a couple days beforehand. Like I think January 15 was the tentative date, but 20 was like, oh, we've got friends coming over tonight
You
to watch the national championship. This has to be down.
you're part of the problem though. You may have had somebody trip. You may have tripped somebody too that had turned their Christmas tree sensors off.
Nope, it's artificial, and we put it in a box, and we put it in my fiance's car, and it'll come out next year.
Okay, that's good.
So we were fine. My last word: new flock of birds on United Airlines. 2020. I was reading about this because I got on this plane, and I was floored at how nice the aircraft was. United in 2023 started using the Airbus A321neo. The lighting, immaculate. HD screens on every seat back.
Ooh,
Economy Plus has a walk up like grab and go that they can use whenever they want. So, like mini bottled waters and snacks and
no
all that.
way. They don't
It
even pay.
was,
They're not even paying for this. This is fucked.
dude, it was the nicest plane that I've ever been on. So, if you are flying United, a lot of them are working out of Chicago and they're going to, it's in this article from afar. They're going to Vegas, Orlando, Phoenix, Fort Lauderdale. Like they're mixed in with the United Airlines aircrafts. They bought them from Airbus. They're still using the 737, but like, wow,
So,
man.
so when they say enjoy your flight, it might actually be possible
I
now.
actually enjoyed my flight. Yeah.
I didn't think that was it would ever be possible.
Yep. But here we are,
Okay.
man. Conclave on the seat back. They had an entire movie like category, and it was just A24 films. Conclave is not an
Wow.
A24 film, but like, I mean, they're pulling out all the stops, man.
Yeah. If I get told to enjoy my flight on that plane,
You might.
I won't get as mad.
I was in an empty row, which probably enhanced my experience, but I cherished it.
All right. Well, hopefully United will pay for us to do that next time and give them the free promo.
Everything you need is in the episode description. We're going to be doing third base on Wednesday. Talk to you guys then.